Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
She heaved a sigh of relief when she saw who it was. Her eyes felt dry, so she rubbed them. She then picked the files up and waved them in the air. Doing overtime. He approached her and took a seat beside her. Do you really work so slow? This is my first job. I have no experience at all. Queenie typed a few strings of numbers and huddled closer to the screen so she could confirm it was the right number. Nigel stared at her in awe. Any boss would feel annoyed seeing her work so slowly. She spent a whole day just transferring these files' info into the system? Queenie turned around. So why did you come back? Pack your stuff and clock out. Leave these for Cecily. You're coming with me for all the appointments I have to handle. And then he asked, did you have dinner already? No. Oh, I owe you a few dinners, so this one's on me. She smiled and stood up, but then her calves cramped up from her sitting too long. God, my legs are cramped. She held the edges of the table and sat back down, massaging her calves. Man, she's a princess. She's not suited for work. She'd be better off as a wife. Holy shit. Did I just consider marrying her? Nigel froze up for a moment. Help me up, Mr. Manson, Queenie pleaded. He extended his hand, and she held it like a crutch as she stood up. Queenie took a few steps, but her legs were still numb. Don't come to work tomorrow, Nigel blurted. Queenie stared at him. Why? You're not a good assistant. You're fired, he said coldly. Is he looking down on me? She bit her lip. Fine, I quit. I don't think I'm fast enough for the job. I don't want to waste your money, she agreed right away. Queenie waited for him at the office's doorstep, and he came out holding a document. The moment he saw her, a smile curled his lips. She was beautiful, curvy, and sweet to the eyes. The light that shone on her almost made her look like an angel, and there was not an ounce of darkness in her eyes. Purity was all that existed. Beauties were a dime a dozen in this society, but Queenie felt different from those ladies. Nigel narrowed his eyes calmly, but there was a hint of admiration in them. When he went by Queenie, he said coolly, let's go. She followed him to the car park, and he asked, did you drive to work? Yeah. Get in my car, he demanded. Queenie didn't object and went into the passenger seat. Thereafter Nigel drove them to a restaurant he picked. Queenie was starving. She had cafeteria food that afternoon, but it wasn't filling. Work exhausted her as well, so she wolfed down the food they ordered. Nigel smiled. Every woman would put on the act of elegance when they were in his presence, but only she would show him her real self. She doesn't want me to take her food, huh? At this moment, her phone rang. She picked it up and snapped, what the hell do you want? Bonnie and I love each other. Don't give me any trouble this Friday, Leslie warned coldly. Queenie put her cutlery down and sneered, listen here, Leslie. Bonnie is my sister. You slept with her, so you better not dump her. Leslie asked hoarsely, you're giving your blessing? To us? I'm more than happy to bless you too. Not like I ever liked you anyway, and I'm not gonna haunt you creepy stalker, she snapped. Like some sort of Leslie asked curiously, have you hooked up with Nigel? None of your business. Guess I thought too highly of you. Bonnie told me you spent a few nights in his house, and I thought you didn't do anything with him. I thought wrong. You're also a gold digger. He leered and hung up. Queenie's face turned red with anger, and she wanted to curse, but Leslie had already hung up. She was about to curse him through a text, but Nigel asked curiously, calling off a marriage? Queenie put her phone down and nodded. Yeah. This Friday. It's still embarrassing. How should I make myself look better? An idea popped into her mind, and she stared at Nigel. Stupidly, she asked, "Do you have time this Friday, Nigel?" "Why do you ask?" He cocked his eyebrow. She answered sheepishly, "Can you come with me to the calling off of my engagement as my fake boyfriend? I want to look better in front of them." Nigel had no interest in that kind of appointment. He refused, "I don't have time, and I'm not interested. But you can get something from this. I can treat you to 10 meals. She tried to bribe him. "You'll do anything as long as I help you out?" He narrowed his eyes. She blinked. "As long as it's reasonable and within my abilities." She added, "Not gonna sleep with you, though." "Fine, but you owe me. And you can't say no when I want to cash in." 1 meal for a favor from her. This is a good deal. Her eyes lit up. She wasn't looking forward to Friday, but now she was. Not gonna let those bitches take all the spotlight during Friday's dinner. I'll show up with Nigel and tell everyone that I dumped him and not the other way around. If I want to do that, I'll have to get someone as rich and powerful as Nigel. When Queenie was about to pay the bill, the waiter told her it had been paid for. She looked at Nigel. When did he do that? Great. Now I owe him 1 more meal. She was still complaining about what Nigel did when they came out, but he drove her straight back to the company so she could drive her car back home. Queenie walked toward her $1 million Ferrari. He didn't leave right away. Instead, he watched as she revved her car up and drove away from the car park. She rolled her window down and waved at him before heading onto the streets. He followed her closely like a dark knight protecting his princess. His car was just a few yards away from her. She knew he was right behind, and it made her heart race. For some reason, she felt safe. When they finally went down different roads, she felt a little down. It was amusing that she was fired on the first day of work, but she was also happy that he would be helping her out on Friday. Feels like we're friends. She came back home and bade her parents good night before heading to her room. When she passed by Bonnie's room, she overheard her talking. Bonnie didn't lock the door, apparently. She heard Bonnie say, "I'm not going to get engaged to you." "Yes, you're calling off the marriage with Queenie, but I'm not going to get engaged to you." Looks like it's Leslie. So she's dumping him? The first thing Queenie did when she woke up the next day was look at the time. 8:50? She froze for a few moments. Oh no, I'm gonna be late. She quickly got out of bed but remembered that she was fired a few seconds later. Oh, no work today. Queenie pulled her hair back and lay back down. She wanted to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come to her. In the end, she got out of bed and washed herself up, and then she changed into casual wear before going downstairs. She was just about to go down when she heard Bonnie say, please, Dad. Take me with you, I want to learn how to manage a company. Please, teach me. Sure. Come with me, but you might get exhausted, Brandon said lovingly. Yay. I won't get exhausted. I'll learn as much as I can so I can take over in the future, she said confidently. You're all pumped up, Miss Bonnie, a servant praised. Well, I am my father's daughter, Bonnie answered sweetly. Queenie saw the two of them off before she went into the dining room, and a servant served her breakfast. This servant practically raised her, and she said gently, you should go to the company and learn some management skills from the master as well, Miss Queenie. But after breakfast. Even the servant could see Bonnie was trying to show herself off in preparation for the inheritance. Aside from the masters of the house who seemed to be oblivious about everything, the servants could see what was going on. From the moment Bonnie came home, she had been trying to take everything for herself. It was obvious she wanted to own everything. Queenie took a sip of the chicken soup and smiled. Your chicken soup is getting better now, Mrs. Lohman. Courtney smiled. But you've been having the same soup for ages. You must be tired of it. No, I'm not. I won't ever get tired of your soup. Queenie beamed. Miss Bonnie said it's tasteless. Ever since Bonnie came back, Courtney's job got harder. She just kept complaining about everything, and Courtney just about had it. I think it's fine, Queenie assured her. It's Thursday today. The dinner's tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to it. Queenie was sorting her items out in the afternoon. When she opened her jewelry box and noticed that her earrings were gone, she felt anger welling up in her. Bonnie. She did this. Bonnie came home at 3, and she was holding a few shopping bags. Instead of learning how to manage a company, she was there to get some money out of Brandon so she could shop. The dinner was around the corner, and she had to get a few dresses for the occasion. Even though she didn't want to get engaged to Leslie, she still had to look better than Queenie. Queenie stopped her right away. You took my earrings away, didn't you? Give them back to me. Bonnie crossed her arms and sneered. And what proof do you have? Nobody else would enter my room. The servants will. When they need to clean it. Bonnie dragged the servants into this on purpose. The servants tensed up and defended themselves. We would never take Miss Queenie's things, Miss Bonnie. And I trust that they won't. I can't say the same about you, so hand them over, Queenie demanded. Bonnie's gaze dripped with venom. You've had everything you wanted since you were a kid. All I took were some earrings, and you're lecturing me about it? I needed to pair them up with my dresses, and I didn't want to go out of my way to buy new earrings. I'm your sister, so can't you just let me have this one? Queenie was tired of hearing the same rhetoric. She would relent in the past, but not now. Not when she knew about Bonnie's true colors. If she kept relenting and giving in, Bonnie would just keep pushing her over the edge. I've compromised and allowed you to have whatever you want for long enough. Is yours, and from now onward, I'm not giving in to you any longer. What's yours, what's mine, is mine. Don't even think about touching anything of mine, let alone taking it away from me. Queenie stared at Bonnie with a pair of steely eyes. Bonnie bit her lip and sneered, Isn't it just a few pairs of lousy earrings? What makes you think I want them anyway? She stormed up the stairs. Queenie followed her to the 3rd floor and heard Bonnie flinging the door open before heading to her jewelry case. She took out 4 pairs of earrings and threw them onto the couch. Here. You can have them back. Furious, Queenie held her hand out. Pick them up and hand them to me. Bonnie froze for a second before snorting. As if I'd do that. The earrings are right there. You can take them yourself. Queenie's eyes flashed coldly. Since you keep saying that I'm your older sister, I shall do my job as your older sister and teach you some manners. From now on, this house isn't the place where you can play your silly mind games and act like a spoiled princess. However, Bonnie seemed insistent on going against Queenie. You teach me manners? What a joke. What makes you think you dash? Queenie grabbed Bonnie by the wrist and shoved her to the ground. As someone who took taekwondo lessons before, it was easy enough for her to pin Bonnie to the floor by resting her knee against Bonnie's neck. She pressed Bonnie's arms against the floor and warned icily, Bonnie Silverstein, you better not mess with me, or else, I don't mind running you out of the house and forcing you to go back to your adoptive parents' house. Why, you? Queenie Silverstein, I'm telling Mom and Dad about this. I'm going to tell them that you don't want me around and that you hate me because I came back. Bonnie shrieked in pain as she tried to push Queenie off. However, Queenie didn't budge as she held Bonnie down with her knee still. If you want others to like you and don't want others to hate you, then you should first learn how to behave like a decent human being. The force that Queenie exerted nearly choked Bonnie. Her face and neck turned red as she screamed, "I can't breathe. Let go of me." Just then, Courtney came upstairs to bring the girls some fruits, and she jumped in fright when she saw the two of them fighting. "You shouldn't be doing this, Miss Queenie," Courtney exclaimed anxiously. "Stay out of this, Mrs. Lohman." "Some people deserve to be taught a lesson," Queenie said to Courtney. Courtney hurried back downstairs. Meanwhile, Bonnie was in so much agony that her face had gone pale. "I'm going to die, Queenie." Queenie let go at last, and Bonnie gasped for air as the flames of resentment in her eyes burned brighter. "Queenie, I'll remember this. From now on, only one of us will get to stay in this house. Just wait and see. Let's see who'll be the first to leave this family." In all honesty, Queenie was mourning the fact that she was hearing this from Bonnie. She longed to have a loving relationship with her sister, and she didn't want a sister who went against her at every turn. How she wished that the family could just live in harmony. However, everything that Bonnie had done so far made Queenie too furious. All Bonnie did was either complain about her to their parents or slander her and pretend to be pitiful to gain their sympathy. Bonnie used every means possible to torment Queenie. That night, Bonnie cried her eyes dry and complained to Brandon and Maggie about how Queenie bullied her in the afternoon. "Dad, you had no idea how frightened I was when she pressed down on my neck with her knee. I nearly suffocated. Do you have proof? Did anyone see this?" Queenie calmly ate her food. "Please prepare some evidence before making wild accusations about me." Bonnie froze in shock. It was her first time seeing Queenie stooping to trickery. She pointed at someone and said she saw it. "She can be my witness." Courtney had just brought the fruit salad to the table. She stiffened as Bonnie commanded her to come over. "Come here. You're my witness. You saw Queenie kneeling on my neck this afternoon, right?" "I didn't see anything like that, Miss Bonnie." Courtney shook her head. Bonnie's face contorted in fury as she glowered at Courtney. The look in her eyes said, "I see. I won't be forgetting this." However, Queenie didn't want to drag Courtney into this, so she turned to her parents and said, "Mom, Dad, I did say a few words to Bonnie this afternoon. She took my earrings, so I wanted to tell her that taking someone else's belongings without asking is the same as stealing. I'm just trying to help her become a decent human being." Brandon nodded in agreement once he heard that and turned to Bonnie. "Bonnie, Queenie did the right thing this time. In the future, you should ask your sister first before you take any of her belongings." Bonnie turned red. She could tell that Queenie had the upper hand this time, so her only choice was to pout and mutter aggrievedly, "Yes, Dad." Maggie tried to console her. "Didn't I give you a credit card? You can just buy whatever you need." Bonnie bit her lip. "I just didn't want to spend money unnecessarily, Mom. But just this afternoon, you came home with 2 bags of clothes. I'm guessing that they cost at least $10,000. Queenie exposed her lie without missing a beat. Bonnie glared at her darkly. "Queenie, Dad approved my purchases. That's enough. Let's just have dinner," Brandon said. Bonnie glanced at Courtney before secretly tugging a strand of hair off and surreptitiously adding it to the soup beside her. "Oh my goodness. What's this? Is it a strand of hair?" A few moments later, just as Bonnie started drinking her soup, she purposely spooned the hair out of her bowl and exclaimed, "Mom, Dad, I feel so disgusted. I nearly ate a strand of hair." Queenie glanced over and Bonnie immediately wrapped the hair up in a piece of tissue before tossing it onto the table. "I'm not drinking this soup anymore. Mom, Dad, you guys shouldn't drink it either. It's revolting." Courtney grew frantic as she quickly defended herself. "Mr. and Mrs. Silverstein, I always wear a hat whenever I prepare the food. Are you trying to imply that it was my hair?" Bonnie raged. Queenie took one look at Bonnie's chestnut-colored hair before studying the strand of hair that was thrown onto the table. She got up and came over to pick up the tissue with the hair. She didn't mind getting her hands dirty as she gave the strand of hair a closer look. "This is your own hair. Don't try to make up false accusations about Mrs. Lohman." Bonnie turned scarlet once more. She didn't think that Queenie would come over and continue to expose her. "You're just harboring resentment that Mrs. Lohman didn't act as your witness just now. You wanted to use your own hair to set her up. You shouldn't have such a malevolent streak, Bonnie." Courtney gave Queenie a look of gratitude. Although she knew that Bonnie was setting her up on purpose, she was just a member of the household staff and couldn't defend herself. Maggie and Brandon exchanged looks before sighing to themselves. They thought that Bonnie was just a little spoiled, but from the looks of it now, she was beginning to show an unscrupulous side to her as well. "I'm full," Bonnie announced. She set down her cutlery and walked off, not forgetting to act as if she were completely broken-hearted. That night, Maggie went to Bonnie's room to comfort her. Bonnie threw herself into Maggie's arms and moaned about being hated by everyone. She also talked about how much she suffered while growing up with adopted parents. Maggie's heart softened after all that. Even though Bonnie had made a mistake tonight, Maggie didn't think much of it anymore. It was Friday morning. Leslie came to the house with a bouquet of red roses, but Bonnie hid in her room and refused to see him. It was Brandon who welcomed him into the house, as the Silversteins and the Paynes had a good relationship with each other. "Mr. Silverstein, my father and I discussed everything last night. I will break off the engagement with Queenie and get engaged to Bonnie right after," Leslie announced expectantly. "Good. That's what we want as well." Brandon nodded. He was beginning to realize that he and his wife couldn't control how Bonnie behaved, so he wanted to help her get a good marriage as soon as possible. Leslie couldn't stop himself from heading upstairs to see Bonnie. He missed her too much. The door to Bonnie's room remained shut even though Leslie kept knocking for ages. It was Queenie who was disturbed by the incessant noise. She opened her door and looked at Leslie, who was standing in front of the opposite room. "She doesn't want to see you, so don't bother knocking anymore." "What's going on with Bonnie?" Leslie was at a loss. It was as if Bonnie had suddenly changed into a whole new person overnight. She didn't care about him anymore and didn't even want to see him. Queenie was probably the only one who knew the reason why. Bonnie's favorite pastime was to steal anything that Queenie wanted. If Queenie didn't want it anymore, then Bonnie lost interest in it too. It was the same each time, regardless of whether it was an item or a man. Right now, Bonnie was fantasizing about seducing Nigel. Just then, Bonnie opened her door. She stood at the door all dolled up, and when she spotted Leslie, she felt a little turned off. "I told you not to come to my house ever again, so why did you still come?"
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.